My name is Lila Moore, and for 12 years, I was the wall no one saw. If you ask the executives at Halberd Dynamics who kept their billion-dollar empire safe from the chaos of the internet, they'd probably point to a vendor contract or some glossy brochure about next-generation security tools. Not one of them would say my name. Not one of them would even remember my face. That was the way it had always been. I wasn't the kind of employee who charmed clients or dazzled boardrooms with PowerPoint slides. I didn't have the loud voice or polished suits. My uniform was always the same: black hoodie, worn-out jeans, headphones slung around my neck. To them, I was just Lila, the firewall babysitter. But the network knew me. Every blinking router light, every log entry scrolling endlessly across my screen, every suspicious IP probe at 3 a.m., those were my companions. I spoke their language. Where others saw meaningless noise, I read stories. An attacker mapping open ports, a botnet probing for a crack, a phishing campaign disguised as normal mail traffic. I stopped them all, quietly, efficiently, without applause. That was the rhythm of my life. Unseen, unpraised, but essential. And in that invisibility, I built something extraordinary. At first, it was necessity. The tools Halberd Dynamics paid for looked impressive, but they always fell short. Alerts missed. Logs dropped. Breaches nearly slipped through. I knew better than to trust vendor promises. So, I began coding my own scripts late at night, when no one was watching, a hidden monitor here, a trap system there. At first, they were just safety nets for my own sanity. But over the years, those scattered pieces became something bigger, something alive. I called it the Ghost Grid. It wasn't official. It wasn't documented. No one else even knew it existed. But the Ghost Grid was smarter, faster, and sharper than anything the company had ever bought. It whispered to me at night when a brute force attempt hit our servers. It nudged me in the morning when malware tried to tunnel through an open port. The official systems would log these incidents hours later. My ghost caught them in seconds. I didn't build it for revenge. I built it because I cared. Because when Halberd Dynamics bragged about unbreakable security in glossy brochures, I knew that their clients were really depending on me, the invisible girl behind the firewall. And then, Adrian Cole arrived. He walked into the building like he owned the air itself. Sharp suit, polished shoes, Silicon Valley smile. The kind of man who believed technology bent to his will simply because he could afford the latest version. The company called him Chief Technology Officer. But in his eyes, we weren't experts. We were costs. I remember his first town hall meeting. All staff gathered in the glass atrium, sunlight bouncing off polished marble floors. Adrian stood at the center, microphone in hand, grinning like a performer. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice echoing against the walls, "Halberd Dynamics is entering a new era. Automation, efficiency, no more wasted hours, no more bloated teams. Logs don't need human babysitters. Firewalls don't need manual oversight. Half of what we pay for IT is unnecessary. And I promise you, we will cut the fat." People clapped. I stood silent, my stomach twisting. Babysitters. That was me. The weeks that followed were worse. Budgets slashed, colleagues laid off, meetings filled with words like outsourcing and AI replacement. To Adrian, we weren't protectors of a fragile digital fortress. We were obstacles to his vision of lean operations. I worked harder than ever, silently patching vulnerabilities his automation tools missed, quietly fixing outages before his dashboards even blinked. But each day, I felt the shadow of inevitability creeping closer, and then it happened. A Friday afternoon, HR called me in. A bland room, beige walls, the smell of burnt coffee. A folder slid across the table. "Your position has been made redundant," the HR officer said without meeting my eyes. "You'll receive a severance package, 3 months' pay, continued benefits. We thank you for your service. 12 years, thousands of nights on call, countless crises averted, reduced to a line in a budget spreadsheet." I signed, not because I agreed, but because I knew arguing was pointless. To them, I was already erased. I packed my things into a cardboard box, a framed photo, a few notebooks filled with scribbled commands, my coffee mug with the words "trust the process" peeling off in faded letters. Colleagues gave polite nods but didn't meet my gaze. Adrian didn't even bother showing up. But what they didn't know was this. My ghost was still alive, buried deep in the servers, woven through the firewalls, hidden behind layers of code they'd never find. My ghost grid hummed silently, waiting. I walked out of the building, cardboard box in my arms, badge still warm from my last swipe. To them, I was gone, forgotten. But ghosts don't leave. Ghosts don't forget. And when they're ignored, ghosts strike back. The first Monday after I left, Halberd Dynamics looked the same from the outside, polished glass windows gleaming against the skyline, executives strutting through the lobby with their lanyards swinging. But beneath that glass surface, something had shifted. For 12 years, I had been the silent rhythm in the background, the unseen guardian who kept the walls strong. Now those walls stood without me. At first, no one noticed. Why would they? The official dashboard still blinked green. Adrian Cole stood taller than ever, bragging to the board that his automation strategy had already saved the company 6 figures in salary cuts. "Look at the logs," he said in his Monday briefing, flashing slides of clean graphs. No unusual traffic, no red alerts, no incidents. Proof that human oversight was never necessary. They clapped for him. I knew better. Because somewhere inside that polished system, the ghost stirred. It began on Wednesday. A subtle ripple in the traffic logs. Nothing that Adrian's flashy dashboards would catch. A surge of packets from an IP range in Eastern Europe. To his systems, it looked like noise. To me, if I had still been there, it was the opening act of a reconnaissance campaign. The ghost grid noticed, and it reacted. A quiet rule fired. The incoming packets were rerouted, not blocked. A honeypot lit up, disguised as a vulnerable endpoint. The attackers thought they had found a way in. In reality, they were being drawn deeper into my trap. But without me, no one at Halberd Dynamics knew what was happening. By Friday, employees began complaining. Small things at first, slow email servers, glitches connecting to the intranet, files not syncing properly between offices. Adrian brushed it off in his weekly address. Transition pains, he called it. The growing edge of automation. But the problems grew. By the following Tuesday, the finance department's transaction system froze midday. Payments queued up, hung, then timed out. A meeting was called. Adrian arrived late, sleeves rolled up, eyes flashing irritation. "This is a simple misconfiguration," he barked. "Our vendors will fix it. There is no breach, no threat. Everyone relax." The truth was sitting right in front of them. The ghost was testing their resilience. It was no misconfiguration. It was my system shifting, probing, waiting to see if anyone alive could understand its signals. No one did. 2 nights later, the first real crack appeared. An unauthorized login attempt slipped through the official firewall. A single account, dormant for years, suddenly triggered activity at 2:17 a.m. The automation system flagged it as low priority, buried among thousands of log entries. The ghost grid, however, pounced. It locked the account instantly, spun up another honeypot, and quietly mirrored the attacker's activity. By sunrise, the intruder thought they had mapped half the company's infrastructure. In reality, they were staring at a carefully staged illusion, a fake network stitched together by my ghost. But illusions consume power. By mid-morning, employees noticed strange behavior. Files duplicating, shared drives disconnecting at random. Adrian's dashboard still blinked green. His pride wouldn't let him see otherwise. At a press briefing that same week, he smiled in front of cameras and said, "Halberd Dynamics has never been more secure. Our new automation has eliminated human error. We are leading the future." The reporters wrote their articles. The stock ticked upward. And in the shadows of the server racks, my ghost listened. I sat at home, coffee growing cold beside me, watching from afar. Not through official channels, my access was long gone. But my scripts, my ghost, they whispered to me in ways no one else could hear. I wasn't angry. Not exactly. I had signed the papers. I had walked away. But watching Adrian preen in front of cameras, bragging about his flawless systems while the ghost quietly spun webs around him, there was a satisfaction I couldn't deny. By the end of the second week, the cracks became harder to hide. Customer complaints hit the help desk. Financial reconciliations delayed. An internal audit flagged unexplained system latencies. Still, Adrian stood firm. "No threats," he repeated in board meetings. "These are minor technical hurdles. Nothing more." But the ghost was patient. It wasn't finished. It was only just beginning, and deep inside the servers of Halberd Dynamics, my invisible fingerprint pulsed like a heartbeat. They had erased me. But ghosts don't stay erased. The first true collapse didn't come with a bang. It came with silence. On a Tuesday morning, just past 9 a.m., Halberd Dynamics' primary transaction servers went dark. Not a slow freeze this time, not a lag or hiccup. One moment the system was alive. The next, it was a blank screen of nothing. Across 3 continents, employees stared in confusion at unresponsive dashboards. Executives dialed into emergency calls. The finance department panicked as millions in scheduled payments hung midstream. Adrian Cole stormed into the war room, his shirt half-buttoned, eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. "What's the status?" he snapped. "Core payment cluster is offline," said Priya, the lead sysadmin. Her fingers trembled over her keyboard. "We can't restart. The failover didn't trigger." "It's a glitch," Adrian barked. "Reroute traffic. Bring the backups online." But the backups were gone. On the big screen, every attempt to launch a redundant server failed. Credentials bounced. Configuration files were missing. The automation system Adrian had bragged about only returned the same error over and over. Access denied. Adrian slammed his fist on the table. "This is impossible. We own these servers." But they didn't. I did. From my small apartment, I watched lines of encrypted telemetry scroll across my private console. The ghost grid, my silent legacy, had activated its 3rd phase. It had restructured the network in ways Adrian couldn't comprehend. Systems he thought he owned were now puppets dancing on invisible strings. The war room descended into chaos. Voices overlapped. Phones buzzed nonstop. One director shouted that clients were threatening lawsuits. Another whispered that competitors were circling like sharks. Still, Adrian refused to bend. "This is not a breach," he insisted, sweat darkening his collar. "We are in control. We just need time." But time was the one thing he didn't have. By noon, headlines hit the press. Halberd Dynamics experiences global outage. Client funds frozen. Stock drops 11%. Automation reliability questioned. Cameras swarmed outside headquarters. Investors called emergency meetings. The board demanded answers. And through it all, Adrian stood in front of the microphones, jaw tight, voice steady. "This is a technical hiccup. We are restoring functionality. There has been no breach, no data loss. Halberd Dynamics remains secure." He smiled for the cameras. But inside the war room, panic grew sharper. Because the ghost wasn't just cutting systems. It was speaking. On every locked terminal, a new message appeared, stark against the black screen. "Who built your walls?" Employees gasped. Priya froze, her face draining of color. This isn't random corruption," she whispered. "This is deliberate." Adrian shoved past her, reading the message with burning eyes. "No, this is sabotage. Some insider planted it." He was half right. I wasn't inside anymore. But my fingerprints were everywhere. By evening, the company bled. Stock price down 19%, high-profile clients pulling contracts. A major banking partner announcing a review of security protocols. The war room had become a graveyard of coffee cups and exhausted engineers. Priya confronted Adrian quietly in the corner. "Listen," she said, voice low. "Whatever this is, it knows us. Knows the infrastructure, the architecture, the legacy code. This isn't an external attacker. It's someone who was here." Adrian stiffened. His gaze flicked to the termination files on his desk. One name, underlined, glared back at him. Lila Moore. For the first time, his bravado cracked. "Get me her address," he muttered. That night, as I sat with my cold coffee, I felt the ripple of his search. His access logs trying to trace me, his team scanning for my digital ghost. I almost laughed. I hadn't left a trail. I had left a maze. At 2 a.m., Halberd's system sputtered again. Not a full blackout this time. Something worse. False data propagated across their network. Transaction records swapped. Client accounts inverted. Billions of dollars appeared to vanish, then reappear in strange places. Auditors woke screaming. Customers threatened lawsuits. The board held an emergency midnight call. Adrian joined, hollow-eyed, voice shaking but still pretending. We're close to resolution. No data lost, just synchronization errors. I have the best people. But he didn't. His best people had no map. Because the ghost grid didn't follow their rules. It followed mine. And then, at the peak of the chaos, the ghost spoke again. This time, not on one terminal. On every screen in the company, conference rooms, cubicles, the massive LED ticker in the lobby, even Adrian's private tablet, the same words flashed, cold and merciless. You erased me, but I remember. The war room fell into dead silence. Priya whispered what everyone was thinking. It's her. Adrian's face turned the color of ash. Cameras captured the panic in the building as employees streamed out, whispering rumors of a vengeful ghost in the system. By dawn, the story leaked online. Hashtags trended. Firewall Ghost, Invisible Guardian. The world was watching. And for the first time, Halberd Dynamics wasn't leading the future. It was being haunted by its past. From my apartment window, I looked out over the city lights. I didn't smile. This wasn't about revenge, not fully. It was about truth. They had erased me, dismissed me as legacy, as irrelevant. Now they would learn what happens when you erase the person who held the walls. This was no longer their system, it was mine, and the ghost wasn't finished. Not yet. The morning after the ghost's second message, the Halberd Dynamics headquarters looked like a fortress under siege. Satellite news vans crowded the front steps. Protesters waved placards demanding refunds. Former clients screamed on social media, accusing the company of fraud. Inside, the board of directors had gathered in a private room on the 27th floor. The mood was grim. Adrian, said the chairwoman, her voice razor-sharp, this is no longer a technical hiccup. The world thinks we've been hacked. Clients are walking away. Our stock has lost 30% in 2 days. Adrian's jaw was tight, but his voice stayed steady. We have the situation under control. This disruption is being exaggerated by the press. My team is restoring order. Your team? Another director snapped. Your team has failed at every step. We need outside expertise. The room buzzed with agreement. Adrian's face flushed red. I am the expertise, he snapped. No outsider understands our architecture better than I do. But they overruled him. By afternoon, a convoy of black SUVs arrived outside Halberd Dynamics. Out stepped a squad of federal investigators and private cybersecurity consultants. Their leader, a tall woman in a gray suit named Valerie Cross, carried herself with quiet authority. We're here to assess the threat, she said flatly, and contain it. For the first time, Adrian looked nervous. The war room swelled with new bodies. Valerie's team moved fast, their laptops humming, code pouring across the big screens. They spoke in clipped tones, tracing anomalies, mapping data flows. It's sophisticated, one consultant murmured. Whoever built this knew the system intimately. They've set up recursive traps, false directories, phantom servers. Every time we think we're in, we're staring at a mirror. Valerie's eyes narrowed. So we're not dealing with amateurs. This is inside knowledge. Priya glanced across the table, her gaze heavy on Adrian. He avoided her eyes. From my apartment, I watched them all through the ghost's eyes. Valerie's team probed deeper than Adrian ever could. They were smart, methodical, precise. But it didn't matter. The ghost grid had been designed for predators like them. At 3 p.m., one consultant announced triumphantly, I found a vulnerability. A backdoor in the authentication protocols. We can shut it down. He pressed enter, and every light in the war room went out. Screens dead, phones silent. Even the overhead lights flickered, plunging the room into darkness. Gasps filled the air. Someone cursed. Then one by one, the screens lit again. But not with dashboards or logs, with words. You don't understand the walls. Stop digging. The consultants exchanged uneasy looks. Priya whispered, It's watching us. Adrian stood rigid, sweat beading his forehead. It's bluffing, he barked. Keep going. Valerie fixed him with an icy glare. This isn't a game of pride, Mr. Cole. Someone built a system smarter than your entire department. If you don't tell me who, we'll find out ourselves. Adrian's lips parted, but no words came. By evening, investors staged an emergency call. The company's largest clients were demanding immediate assurances, or they would terminate contracts worth billions. Adrian faced the board again, exhaustion dragging at his features. "Give me one more day," he begged. "One more day and I'll prove we're in control." But the chairwoman leaned forward. Her voice was calm, almost pitying. "You promised us control 2 weeks ago. All you've delivered is humiliation." The silence that followed was heavy as stone. Meanwhile, the ghost tightened its grip. Across Halberd's global branches, office computers displayed distorted login pages. Printers spat out sheets of paper filled with the same phrase over and over. "Remember who built your walls." Employees whispered in the hallways, terrified of the unseen phantom. Some refused to log in at all, convinced they were being watched. Rumors spread of cursed accounts, of screens that showed names of ex-employees who should not exist. And always, Adrian denied it. "There is no ghost," he shouted in meetings. "It's sabotage, plain and simple. Probably a disgruntled former worker. Nothing more." But his words carried less weight each time. The board stopped clapping. The employees stopped believing. That night, Valerie confronted him privately. "You know who it is," she said, her tone deadly calm. "Don't lie to me." Adrian's shoulders sagged. His bravado crumbled. "She's nobody," he muttered. "Just a data ops girl, invisible, forgettable." Valerie studied him. "And yet she built something that's crippling your entire empire." Adrian said nothing. From my apartment window, I watched the city lights shimmer. The ghost whispered to me, its data pulses like a heartbeat in the dark. I hadn't wanted this level of destruction, not at first. But every denial Adrian spoke, every time he dismissed me as nobody, it hardened something inside me. I had been their wall for 12 years. I had been invisible. And when they erased me, they thought nothing would change. Now they knew, and tomorrow, the walls would fall completely. Because ghosts don't just haunt. They remember, and they strike. The final collapse began at dawn. Halberd Dynamics headquarters woke to alarms that never stopped ringing. Every server, every terminal, every database screamed red. Passwords reset themselves every 5 minutes. Backup drives erased mid-restore. Firewalls melted into static. By 8 a.m., the company was blind. No email, no transactions, no communication. Just silence, punctuated by the ghost's heartbeat. On every screen, the same words pulsed. "I was the wall. You erased me. Now you stand alone." In the boardroom, chaos reigned. Executives shouted over one another. Phones buzzed with reporters demanding answers. Investors threatened lawsuits worth billions. The chairwoman stood and slammed her palm against the table. "Enough, Adrian, this ends now. Fix it or step aside." Adrian's face was pale, his eyes sunken. His once slick confidence had rotted into desperation. "I can fix it," he muttered. I just need... But his words dissolved. He had nothing left. Valerie Cross, the lead investigator, stared him down. "You can't stop her, can you?" Adrian didn't answer. Meanwhile, across the city, I sat in my apartment watching. For 12 years, I had been invisible. For 12 years, I had protected them without credit, without thanks. When they replaced me with machines, they thought they had erased me. But you don't erase ghosts. You feed them. And now, the ghost grid was finishing what they started. I typed a final command into my private console. The system responded instantly, obedient like a loyal hound. On Halberd's global network, every financial record, every internal memo, every shadow of data dissolved into white noise. Years of information unraveled in seconds. Halberd Dynamics wasn't just crippled. It was hollowed out. In the war room, Priya screamed. "It's gone. All of it. Financials, contracts, client records. Everything's been wiped." Adrian staggered to the screen, his voice a hoarse whisper. No, it's not possible." But the screens didn't care. The ghost had spoken its verdict. One last message painted itself across every device in the company. Without me, you are nothing. The collapse hit the world like an earthquake. Breaking news reports spread across every channel. Halberd Dynamics declares system failure, 40 billion in contracts vanish. Automation dream ends in nightmare. Within hours, competitors swallowed Halberd's abandoned clients. Stock value flatlined. Lawsuits stacked higher than the glass tower that once symbolized their power. And Adrian? By noon, the board had stripped him of his title. Security escorted him out of the building while cameras flashed. His empire crumbled around him, piece by piece, like sand through broken fingers. The man who had mocked me, erased me, claimed my work as his own. Now he was the ghost, forgotten, invisible. That night, I sat by the window, city lights flickering like embers of a dying fire. My laptop glowed softly, the ghost humming inside, patient, loyal, eternal. This wasn't about revenge anymore. Not really. It was about memory. The world forgets the invisible, the quiet ones, the nameless guardians. But walls remember who built them, and so do ghosts. I closed my laptop, the hum fading into silence. The war was over, but the ghost would always remain. And if you're still here, listening to the story of the Firewall Ghost, remember this. Just like Lila, sometimes the invisible ones hold the real power. Sometimes the walls you ignore are the only things keeping you safe. If you want more stories like this, dark, thrilling, and unforgettable, subscribe now and join me for the next